All right, everyone, thank you for listening to another edition of TPA's USPS Reform podcast. This is a podcast where we discuss what's going on at the Postal Service and what's happening on the reform front as TPA and other groups work to really solve the problems over at the Postal Service. So joining me today, we're going to have a different guest. Usually we have TPA President David Williams, but today we're actually going to have Justin Sykes, who works in federal affairs at Americans for Tax Reform. Justin, thanks so much for joining us today.
Yeah, happy to be here. Thanks, Michi.
So I wanted to bring you on because you've done a lot of work on the issue of postal reform. First, I want to get your general sense of where the agency is financially. You know, what's going on over there, you know, from your view in terms of how does it look? What's going on with the books and what's going on with really the service and how USPS is really surviving in today's world?
Sure. Well, I'll start by saying surviving is a generous description. So it's no secret that the Postal Service has suffered financial instability, and they have obviously billions in unfunded liabilities, and a lot of this has to do with a shift away from basic postal products. So you have the rise of email, text message, that any other form of communication outside of just peer-to-peer mailing. And that's created a deficit. Obviously, they've posted, I think, somewhere in $50 billion in losses since 2007.
They have $1.6 billion the last one, or 1.3, something
and
like
I think they're
1.3?
projected to do, I think, around $4 billion in losses this year in total. So you see an obvious decline, but a lot of the concern is that the agency, instead of focusing on shoring up their financial services, financial house, getting that in order, instead of focusing on that, they're looking to expand services to things like grocery delivery and banking, and that's the type of thing that is a misguided way to try to increase your revenue, and it almost would be more. It would almost be more
cost effective.
Yeah, cost effective, or it would make more sense to do that if they had their core mission of mail delivery in order. I mean, you've seen over the last couple of years the decline in the efficiency of delivery times and that type of thing.
So they're not even finished building, fixing one house, and they're already trying to move into another.
Exactly. So
another house that's already doing fine on its own, by the way, with other owners, with other people. Yeah. So we see, the idea of grocery delivery, and now financial services is something that they're trying to break into, really taking down, third-party lending, probably because this administration doesn't like it. But with grocery delivery, it's not very transparent. We don't know how much it's costing, and they keep approving these, quote, test markets runs that they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the cap for revenue was $10 million. When the agency's losing $1 billion a quarter,
sure.
$10 million in revenue cap isn't really going to do much, and we don't even know if they're making any revenue off it. So, we want to reform it. What are the ideas for reform from the standpoint of Americans for Tax Reform? What does ATR look at when someone says, well, what would you like out of postal reform?
So obviously, as I mentioned, just having the agency focus on delivering the mail. I know that sounds simple and obvious, but it's obviously a complicated process for them.
What an idea.
Yeah.
Just do what you're supposed to do. Who would have thought?
And then just increasing efficiency. I know I read a report last week that there's over 4,000 locations that have less than 4 customers daily. So, looking to... It is completely mind-boggling. But to look up or to focus on shoring up those inefficiencies and making some changes as far as from an operational standpoint. Mm-hmm. And I will give it to them. They do face some hurdles in Congress, and so you could look to reforms there. But that's not going to change the entire picture for them. So getting them out of shifting to non-postal products and services and focusing on the core mission of mail delivery.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, instead of trying to expand to other areas, which kind of from our standpoint, those types of reforms, you would see a quasi-governmental, government-backed entity competing increasingly more in the free market. So they're already at an advantage with the monopoly they have on products, and you have them increasingly competing with private firms now. If this is the type of reform that they're going to keep looking at.
Now, when you talk about Congress and saying how they're one of the biggest hurdles, one thing I just want to mention, a reform that should have been done a long time ago, ending Saturday delivery.
Mm-hmm.
And this is something that even the former Postmaster General at the time agreed.
Yeah.
And it would save a couple $2 billion over a span of several years, which is great for an agency that continues to lose money. This is a good thing in terms of savings. Congress couldn't even get that done.
Yeah.
Which really goes to show how difficult reform is. Even reforms of the simplest notion that could save billions of dollars are tough to get. Now, that doesn't excuse what the agency is doing in terms of the new services, but it does show that the agency isn't the only problem in terms of the thinking and what's going on. Congress, 4,000 postal building or postal service locations that are open for business with 4 people daily. That's a Congress problem.
Mm-hmm.
That's a problem that Congress faces because they're not willing to attack that. So speaking of Congress, there's a bill. There's legislation that is supposedly going to advance postal reform. What do you think of it? I know what TPA's thoughts are. We've talked about the bill. In fact, I think we talked about it on a previous episode. So what does ATR think about the reform bill from Representative Chaffetz?
Yeah, so we've mentioned this before, and this is a piece of legislation introduced by Chairman Chaffetz and committee's ranking member Elijah Cummings. And, as I said, we recognize the need for reform, but a lot of the issues that we've just talked about, this legislation basically cements those types of issues into law. I mean, shifting to non-postal products, increasing rates. Fully, a lot of the reforms are basically, I think TPA has actually called them window dressings, which is a perfect description. It
seems like just a bill to pass a bill.
Exactly.
And it just gives a little more credence to the Postal Service not doing what they're supposed to do, which is get back to the core mission of mail delivery.
Exactly. And fully, this bill...
It's a reform bill that reforms in all the ways we don't want to reform.
Exactly. So, yeah, you're shifting to non-postal products and services. And fully, there's an entire title in the bill devoted to the Chief Innovation Officer, who's tasked with putting in place non-postal products and services. So
we're creating a whole new job to find whole new things that have nothing to do with mail delivery.
Exactly. And at the same time, we still have the same problems with mail delivery that are basically being overlooked in this bill.
So ATR put out a letter today, and TPA signed the letter, as well as over 20 organizations now, I believe, to Congress. And just sum up the letter really quick.
Yeah, so the letter, as you said, we've got a total of 22 organizations signed on. And the letter basically puts forth our concerns with shifting to non-postal products, increasing rates, and fully, I mean, if you're going to increase rates on monopoly products, this is the one area that you have your main source of revenue, so you're only disadvantaging yourself. So those two items, and then just the general fact that a lot of the reforms are, like we said, window dressing. They don't really do anything. So we've talked before about the governor's board at the post office.
It's a ghost ship over there.
And talking about it is. Over the last year, they've only had one slot filled out of 9.
And then the other 2 are just the Postmaster General and then someone else.
Deputy Postmaster
General. So those are built in. And so instead of addressing the idea that there's vacancies, they just cut the membership. But guess what? It's still vacant. So it doesn't address the problem of leadership at the Postal Service.
No.
So I think that, this is, I understand people wanted to get a bill on the floor just to say they introduced something, to say, hey, we did this, but it does all the wrong thing. I mean, honestly, this bill could not be any worse when you look at what the priorities for those who want to reform the Postal Service are, and then you match what's in the bill. It's grocery delivery, new services, bad idea. The bill, let's do more of it.
Exactly.
Board of Governors, vacant. How do we address it? Let's just cut the membership. Rates are a problem. Or rates are the way we make money. The purchases are the way we make money. let's raise rates on those. So
Exactly.
it does all the wrong things, and it's unfortunate because you want to see something that you can support. You want to see something that, okay, this is something we can get behind, and there's nothing to address the 4,000 locations that have 4 people.
Yeah.
There's nothing to address Saturday delivery. There's nothing to address transparency on these non-postal service deals that are made. So, it's not good, and we're happy to sign the letter, and we're definitely going to push it out. I want to ask you before you go, what do you think is the sort of the, we talked about the near term. Knock on wood, I hope this bill is going nowhere.
Yeah.
So we're going to see more losses because it's not the needs are not being addressed. But what do you see going forward on a way to get somewhere, to get some kind of meaningful reform or some kind of meaningful focus back at the USPS on what they're supposed to be doing?
Well, I think it's simple, and it comes down to just groups like ours actually talking to legislators and raising these concerns and saying that this is going the wrong way. We're going down the wrong path. Let's get back to what the Postal Service is supposed to do. Let's look at legislation that would actually shore up the finances, would actually increase their focus on what they're supposed to be doing, mail delivery.
Yeah.
It sounds simple and easy, but it's not. So raising the profile of just those types of simple reforms is what we need to do down the road. And we can get legislation. Obviously, this legislation is not ideal by any means, obviously.
Yeah.
And it's actually pretty terrible. But getting logical reforms into some type of legislation and getting lawmakers that understand that. So Chairman Chaffetz, I know, wants to do something here, but he's just completely missing the mark on this and is really outside what needs to actually happen.
Unfortunate. Well, on that somber note, where can folks find more about what ATR is doing, not just on postal reform, but what ATR is doing on many other issues, because they are a very good ally in many fights that taxpayer advocates have had over the years?
Yeah, so the easiest way is to go to our website, www.atr.org, and you can find our press releases. You can search topics and that type of thing. And we also have the Taxpayer Protection Pledge, so we have a rundown of that as well. So
follow them on Twitter too, @TaxReformer as well.
Yes.
All right. Well, Justin, thanks so much for joining us, and we'll be looking for an update soon on these issues.